things that he brought home with him, this early VAR, which we're very pleased to have in the collection. These two pieces here, you recognize this, of course, as a M1 carbine. But this particular carbine was presented to V.M.I. alumnus George S. Patton in North Africa. And the Farsi here, the sort of the Sanskrit you see here, it has his name in English here, G.S. Patton Jr. Then below that, it has, this, and we had that recently translated, and the Farsi says G.S. Patton the Smaller, because they don't have a word
for junior.
They don't have a word for junior, and probably George Patton himself never knew that, because he probably wouldn't have accepted it. You had said George Patton the Smaller.
Print your name.
Yeah, what does it say here?
This is
one name for
excuse me. Well, this is we have 5 patent-related firearms in our collection, presented by the family. This being one of them. This is, as you probably recognize, a Walther. This Walther was on the bench of its maker near the end of World War II, when the factory at Zelamela was liberated by the 90th Infantry Division. These were being custom made as presentation grade, because Hitler had just given an order to the Walther plant for these things. He was going to be presenting them to high-ranking Nazis. And when the guys in the 90th Infantry Division came in, they said, well, keep on working on them, but we're going to give you a different list of names. And one of the names was George Patton, and this was presented to George Patton. Eisenhower got one, Manton Eddy got one, several other high-ranking general officers. George Patton ultimately gave this one to his fellow V.M.I. alumnus, Thomas T. Handy, V.M.I. class of 1914, and deputy chief of the United States Army, serving as the deputy to George Marshall, class of 1901, who was the chief of the Army. So this is that has a very interesting history associated with 2 V.M.I. Alumni. Here's another kind of interesting firearm. A fellow serving in the Pacific, in the Philippines, saw Filipino scouts using things like this. It's a piece of mahogany and just some water pipe that happens to be a 12 gauge water pipe, and they would make these things in the jungle to as defense against the Japanese. You would put this together like thusly, and here's your safety, that screw right there. You would sort of tighten that down, because the firing pin is right in here, and when you wanted to fire it, you simply took your safety off and you went like that, and the shotgun fired. So the American GI that saw this says, man, that is so simple, that's ingenious. There's going to be insurgents all over the world that are going to want those things, and I'm going to supply them. So he goes to Connecticut after the war and starts the Gorilla Gun patent pending company. I guess chimpanzees and other monkeys could use it as well. But the Gorilla Gun for guerrilla and fighters. Within 6 months he's out of business, because the problem as a business model is that if it was so easy to make in the jungle in the Philippines, the jungles of South America, it would be easy to make there too. So he sells maybe 200 of these things, and it's really quite a novelty today. This is not a Henry Stewart piece, but just one of our other representative pieces. This PPSH machine gun, submachine gun, incredibly prolific, starting in the early part of World War II and afterwards. This particular one, though, you see it has all sorts of engraving here. PFC Economy, United States Marine, on the 28th of November 1950, had an intimate experience with this particular gun because it was being held by a Chinese soldier facing him. These two, the Marine and the Chinese soldier, had startled one another. They had come around a berm, and there they were, just a few feet from each other, and they both took a bead on the other one, but were frozen from pulling the trigger, waiting for the other to move. And Lieutenant Sullivan who's also commemorated here. Lieutenant Sullivan, Private Economy's commander, is yelling, "Shoot, shoot!" You know, so in that what must have seemed like, you know, half an hour, but just a split second, finally Economy pulls the trigger, and the Chinese soldier falls. And they walk over to confirm the kill, and Lieutenant Sullivan says, "Economy, you better take that home with you, because it gave you your life, because it didn't fire. You know, you got the first round off." And Economy did. He picked it up, brought it back home with him to his home in Roanoke, Virginia, until he realized it's probably illegal for him to have that thing. So he dutifully called the ATF, and the ATF said, "You're right, you can't have that." However, we have a very good relationship, unlike most people, with the ATF, and whenever they find military or historical weapons, they let us know about them, and we have sort of first refusal, if you will, before they are destroyed. So several very important pieces have come into the collection by that route. Everyone recognizes this, of course, Thompson. This is the military model. This particular one was carried by a V.M.I. alumnus in Vietnam, a time that we weren't issuing these to our guys. We were issuing other firearms that took its place. But the reason this one ends up in the hands of a V.M.I. graduate, a fellow named Russ Proctor, they were in a firefight, and men are getting wounded, and a helicopter comes in to evacuate the wounded, and Russ is helping one of the wounded guys into the helicopter, and he takes his M16 and he lays it down on the deck of the Huey, and when the pilot sees that the wounded guys are in, he's gone, and there goes Russ Proctor's M16. So the firefight is still going on. He doesn't have a weapon, and one of the South Vietnamese officers said, "Use this." We were giving these to the South Vietnamese along with M1s, now obsolete in our inventory. When he was using it in the jungle, it didn't have the shoulder stock. It just had the grip and the forestock. So he was using it like an automatic pistol. He uses it several months, brings it home with him, or at least has it shipped home in a artillery casing that is received by his father, and this is what was inside. And just recently came to us. And I just recently discovered that he wasn't the only V.M.I. alumnus to carry one of those things in Vietnam, because the fellow back there did as well. This is what it appears to be. It's an M16. Until very recently, it was the standard arm in the United States military from the 1960s. But this is actually a very special one. This is the experimental model. This is the XM16 E1. These were issued to the field in Vietnam, a selected number of them. I don't know exactly how many thousand there would have been, but they go into the jungles for the troops to field test them. And then after the period of time, you know, they say, well, this works well, this doesn't work, this needs to be changed, this is good, all that kind of thing. And then the Army took all of that information and came out with the M16A1 and took all of these back out of the field and destroyed them, with obviously a few exceptions. This XM1 also came, XM16 also came home by disassembly from the soldier that this was issued to. It was sent to his father, and his father said, well, what am I going to do with that? He puts it in his attic. The father dies about 2 years ago. And the family now, the children, are getting the house prepared for sale. So they're cleaning out the attic, and here's this thing sitting in the corner. And they too realize that maybe we shouldn't have that. And it makes its way, fortunately, to the V.M.I. Museum. Interestingly enough, we didn't even have any M16, and now we have one of the very, very rare M16s in the collection. And I'm sure you fellows are very familiar with this and its counterpart to the AK series of weapons. Now, for those of you that are interested, I have gloves up here that you're more than welcome to put on and examine these closely. I just ask, of course, as you would know, don't dry fire them, you know, don't pull the hammer back and pull the trigger and that sort of thing. But you're more than welcome to examine these, and we'll head downstairs here very soon. This area will be locked. When we leave, we'll lock this area. And we'll count them, too. I'm sure that won't be necessary.